I hope so. Now, Inon, as a observer of this, as a guy who probably plays these games, give us the consumer perspective. Obviously, this is something that you think should happen, right?
Well, obviously, yes. I always feel that the sort of like legal quote-unquote music industry is always like about 10 years behind, you know, and that's actually really stopping us because, you know, when you really want to, I mean, I understand all the artists and I understand the labels. They need to make profit of what you're doing. Now, obviously, we're talking royalties here, right? Now, I feel that overall, and I'm speaking as a composer, there has to be major changes to the whole royalty system,
right,
you know, in order that what you're talking about will be realized. Because you can download a song and then but then that's it? You have it for forever? I mean, somebody needs to, you know, keep this thing rolling, right, you know?
No, I just think that it's like, you know, you used to have a CD. It's like, you know, you'd have that song, and now I think people are going to be frustrated when they bought all these downloadable tracks for these games, and they're like, well, what do you mean I have to re-download Stone Temple Pilots again for the new game?
You know what? It's all going away. The bottom line is it's all going away. When people buy music, we're still sort of hanging on, as he just alluded to the past legally and all these business guys. At the end of the day, we're going to see in the very near future where you pay X a month and you're going to have every song created and you can do whatever the heck you want with it. Whether it's subscription or, you know, I don't think it's going to be streamed, whether they exist in your hard drive or they exist in a cloud server in the sky somewhere, and every song ever and every score ever is available to you. And maybe there's some extra money you pay per month to get, you know, the score to this or that a couple days earlier. We'll see how it pans out. But at the end of the day, there's more money if you look at the profit and loss sort of margin, all that stuff in that type of business. There's more money to be made. Right. The only problem is that the people in the major labels lose the sense of control and distribution.
Exactly.
And that's what this is all about. And once we get over that hump and it gets in, because at the end of the day, look, they tried to put Napster away, right? And they did. Then now the RIA goes out there and sues a bunch of kids, right, or moms of kids. You can't stop technology. You can't stop this from happening.
But it is. What's interesting, though, I think, is that, you know, on these consoles, it's a closed system. And then another thing that I think, you know, Charles, consumers I think have been frustrated with is that, you know, they're paying all this money for these downloadable tracks, and now, you know, even with something like World Tour, they're like, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to use my Rock Band drums with this game, so then I have to buy all this equipment on top of it, and people could potentially have, you know, 2 drum sets and 2 guitars. I mean, do you understand the frustration that consumers have on that level too, in terms of having to, you know, it feels like sort of a, you know, the same thing that's happening in the music business is sort of all this control. It's now people saying like, well, you've got to have 2 different drum sets to do this.
Yeah, well, you know, that's one of the challenges of trying to innovate at the same time trying to keep everything backwards compatible. Right. So you know, as we develop the games, both hardware and software, we keep trying to put in new features, right? But consumers have already bought all this, you know, sort of, you know, old feature set, whether it's software or hardware. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges of something we do, because price of our music games tends to be high because you have a peripheral plus software. But you know, it's something that I think going forward, everybody's a little bit more cognizant of. And I think the only thing I can say is,
you don't have to buy a new, you know, guitar every year for all these games.
The only thing I can say is that as you know, as we create new games, our challenge is to find something which is worth that value. Because consumers will pay as long as they're getting what they perceive as value for that. So, you know, if we can put enough in there to convince them to upgrade to the new feature set, then you know, at least we've seen that they'll do it.
And you're saying technically it's like, you know, because your drums now have cymbals or something and the Rock Band drums don't, it's like you can't really sort of use those old drums.
Right, because we have a lot of features that are based on that functionality in the hardware. So, you know, but at the same time we make it backwards compatible. So it's the same thing you go through with the consoles. When you go from, you know, Xbox to Xbox 360 or PS2 to PS3, you try to have some backwards compatibility, but at some point you also have to try to upsell everybody to the new functionality.
One day it'll all be solved, you know.
One
or
console
maybe we'll
forever.
just revolt and just listen to all your music and passively sit back there, right?
Well, you know, I mean, I just remember, you know, a little story or anecdote. I've sort of like worked with a group, a really good rock group, you know, when I started working on Crisis. And I told them, you know, yo guys, I mean, I'm presenting you a chance here to write, and they're really good, to write a song for the game. Maybe we could just incorporate it in the game. Maybe we could put it in the credits and stuff. Okay, we need to talk to our label. We need to talk to this. We're just like, eventually, never happened. And then Crisis came up.
Can you tell us what band it was?
No. I'm really sorry.
Never
but no.
happened. It wasn't corn. They didn't move to haze.
It wasn't corn.
All right.
But definitely they're like, duh, you know. I mean, it's like.
And you lose that opportunity.
Because after all, you know, yes, revenue, yes, royalties, but in our world today, it's all about exposure. You know, and if you are being exposed the most, of course, you don't need to basically, you know, let go of your rights, but you have to understand and see the big picture and see that if you're gaining, you know, the right exposure, then business will come. You know, business will come eventually.
Hopefully. All right, well, when we come back in the bonus round, we'll wrap up our talk about music and games and talk about the future of where music may be going next in your favorite games.
Next time in the bonus round, we're talking music composition inside music games and wondering where Guitar Hero goes over the next 5 years.
We believe that's the next step, you know, taking consumers from playing music to actually composing.
The debate continues next Sunday right here in the bonus round.
BonusRound.